And because you kept going, no one sees you wake up tired. It doesn't matter how many hours you slept, your body gets out of bed, but something inside you stays behind. You do what needs to be done. You work. You handle your responsibilities. You answer messages, you show up. You smile when you're expected to smile. But underneath all of that, there's a constant weight, a tiredness that never really goes away. People say it's normal. They say it's just stress. They say everyone feels like this now. But deep down, you know that's not true. Because this isn't physical exhaustion. It's not about sleep. It's not about motivation. It feels like your energy is being drained slowly, every single day, without anyone noticing. And maybe the hardest part is this: you're still functioning. You didn't stop. You didn't fall apart. You kept going. How exhausted you really are. This video isn't about laziness. It isn't about discipline. It's about a quiet exhaustion that hits strong people. The ones who carry more than they should, for longer than they should. If you feel tired all the time, even when you're doing fine, stay until the end. Because the problem might not be your body. It might be something much deeper. Here's what most people get wrong about being always tired. They think it's about doing too much, working too hard, pushing beyond limits. But the real exhaustion doesn't come from effort. It comes from suppression, from holding things in, from swallowing frustration, from staying quiet when you want to scream, from pretending you're okay so you don't become a burden, from adapting over and over until you don't even recognize yourself anymore. Your mind is constantly working overtime, not to create, not to dream, but to contain, to manage emotions you never release, to carry expectations you never chose, to live a life that looks stable on the outside, but feels empty on the inside. And that kind of tiredness is dangerous, because it doesn't show up all at once. It builds quietly. Day after day, your energy leaks into things that don't give anything back. Conversations that drain you, responsibilities that feel endless, a version of yourself that exists only to survive. You're not tired because you're weak. You're tired because you've been strong for too long, without rest, without relief, without honesty. And the worst part? You've gotten so used to this exhaustion that it feels normal now, but it's not. Here's the most confusing part about this kind of tiredness. Your life looks fine. You wake up, you work, you respond to messages, you handle responsibilities, you show up. From the outside, nothing is wrong, but inside, everything feels heavy. You don't feel excited anymore, just relieved when the day ends. You don't feel motivated, just pressured. You don't feel alive, just functional. And that's the trap. Because when you're still functioning, no one worries. No one asks deeper questions. No one notices the slow erosion happening inside you. Even you don't notice it at first. You tell yourself, this is just adulthood. This is normal. This is how life works. But deep down, there's a quiet realization you try not to face. You're not living and you're maintaining. Maintaining routines you didn't consciously choose. Maintaining relationships that no longer energize you. Maintaining a version of yourself that once made sense, but doesn't anymore. And this constant maintenance is exhausting, not because it's hard or style, but because it's meaningless. Humans can endure almost anything when it has purpose. But when effort feels disconnected from meaning, the body rebels. That's when the tiredness becomes permanent. That's when rest stops working. That's when weekends don't restore you anymore. Because the problem isn't lack of sleep, it's lack of alignment. This exhaustion didn't come from nowhere. And it's not random. Something is quietly taking your energy every single day. Not in dramatic ways, not all at once, but in small, invisible pieces. Your attention is constantly being pulled outward. Notifications, expectations, noise, opinions. Pressure to stay informed, pressure to stay relevant, pressure to respond. You rarely get a moment where your mind is truly yours. Even when you're resting, you're consuming. Even when you're alone, you're stimulated. Even when you stop working, your nervous system doesn't. Your body may be resting, but your mind never is. And the mind is where energy is lost first. You're constantly reacting to messages, to news, to other people's emotions, to standards you never agreed to. Reaction becomes your default state, and living in reaction mode slowly empties you. That's why silence feels uncomfortable now. That's why doing nothing makes you restless. That's why real rest feels unfamiliar. You're not addicted to being busy. You're conditioned to being occupied. And that condition keeps you tired, not because you're doing too much, but because you're never allowed to stop internally. You've probably tried to rest. You went to bed earlier. You took days off. You slowed down when you could, and for a moment, it helped. But the tiredness always came back. That's because rest only works when the problem is physical. But what you're dealing with isn't physical exhaustion. It's identity exhaustion. You're tired of being on, tired of being reliable, tired of being available, tired of being reasonable, tired of being the version of yourself that keeps everything running. Rest doesn't fix that. Sleep doesn't fix that. Vacations don't fix that. Because you're not recovering from effort. You're recovering from constant self-suppression, from holding back thoughts you don't say, from tolerating situations you've outgrown, from playing roles that no longer fit who you are. And the body keeps score. It manifests as tiredness, brain fog, irritability, a constant low-level heaviness you can't explain. That's why advice like, just rest more, feels insulting. Because deep down you know the problem isn't energy, it's misalignment. And until that's addressed, no amount of rest will make you feel restored. If you're always tired, the solution isn't doing more. It's not optimizing your routine, it's not becoming more disciplined. The first real shift is much quieter. You stop reacting, not all at once, not dramatically. You start creating small pockets where your attention comes back to you. Moments where you don't explain yourself. Moments where you don't justify your choices. Moments where you don't immediately respond. Because every explanation costs energy. Every justification drains you. Every unnecessary reaction keeps you tethered to things that don't matter. Strong people get tired, not because they do too much, but because they carry too much that isn't theirs. Expectations, emotional labor, other people's urgency, other people's noise. The shift begins when you recognize this simple truth. You don't owe access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves your attention. Not everything deserves a response. Not every thought deserves to be entertained. Energy doesn't return when you rest. It returns when you reclaim. And reclaiming starts with boundaries that are invisible, but firm. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming selective. And selection is where strength quietly returns. As you stop reacting to everything, something strange happens. Your mind slows down, not because life got easier, but because fewer things are allowed inside. You notice that most of what drained you was unnecessary. Unspoken pressure, imaginary deadlines, other people's expectations living rent-free in your head. You begin to feel calmer, not happier, not excited, just clearer. And clarity is powerful. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't listen. You stop proving your worth to systems that don't reward it. You stop chasing validation that never satisfies. This isn't withdrawal, it's control. Quiet control. You still show up, you still handle responsibilities, but now you do it on your terms. And with that control comes something you haven't felt in a long time: space. Space to think without pressure. Space to feel without judgment. Space to exist without constantly performing. The tiredness doesn't vanish overnight, but it loosens its grip. Because you're no longer leaking energy everywhere, you're choosing where it goes. Here's the truth most people never hear. You were never weak. You were never lazy. You were never falling behind. You were just carrying too much noise for too long. A world that never shuts up. A system that rewards exhaustion. A culture that confuses busyness with purpose. And somewhere along the way, you mistook survival for living. But now you see it. The tiredness wasn't a flaw. It was a signal. A warning that your energy was being spent on things that don't matter. On people who don't notice. On expectations that were never yours. Nothing is wrong with you. You don't need more motivation. You don't need a new routine. You don't need to push harder. You need fewer voices, fewer demands, fewer reasons to explain yourself. Because the moment you stop fighting everything, your strength comes back quietly. Not loud, not dramatic, not for show. Just steady, just grounded, just yours. And maybe that's why you've been tired. Not because you're failing, but because you're finally ready to live with intention instead of noise.